Welcome to the Rural Blueprint, a podcast celebrating the innovative spirit of rural entrepreneurs who are transforming their communities. I'm Brad from Reinventing Rural, and each episode we spotlight small business owners and community partners who have built thriving enterprises in rural America. Join us as we explore their journeys and strategies, providing inspiration and practical insights for anyone passionate about rural development and entrepreneurship.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rural Blueprint. Brad unfortunately missed out on an opportunity to speak to Liz Turner, but I'm lucky because I get to speak to Liz today. I'm so excited to chat with you, Liz. You are somebody that has been featured multiple times on our Substack articles. You are the Compost Chick. You have made a business that I am so interested in and something that makes me feel very excited to support small businesses in Oregon because I think it's something that you saw a need for and you jumped in. But Liz is an entrepreneur who we have supported. Liz received a Kiva loan, and that helped spark their business and begin to grow. But can you tell us who you are and a little bit about your business that you've created and worked so hard on?
So I'm Liz Turner, aka the Compost Chick. So I've always been into gardening, always very outdoorsy, and always wanted to do something that would be beneficial for my community and for the planet and for next generations. And so somehow I kind of stumbled upon composting, and we have chickens at home, so we weren't having to separate like meat and cheese and stuff. We would just give the chickens everything, and then everything else we would mix with wood chips and leaves and compost it. And I started doing that for a few of my coworkers when I worked at a hospital, and then it became like 10 of my coworkers wanted to do it. And then through Reinventing Rural, I did their 10-week startup class, and that kind of really helped me focus on how, like, the steps I should take in which order, or at least focus on one thing a week to really help launch my business. So Reinventing Rural has been very supportive of my business through the last few years. And so basically my business is we come to your house or your curb, and we pick up your food scraps in a very cute pink bucket with my face on it, and then we do all the work for you. So we take your food scraps, we mix it with the right amount of carbons, we make sure it gets turned or rotated so there's air involved. We age it for 8 to 9 months, and then you get the finished product back so that you can plant in your gardens, or we sell it to local farms. So that's the gist of our business. But we also have worm composting, so we can do worm castings. We sell eggs directly to our customers, so it's kind of like this closed loop situation. We have some restaurants that we take their food scraps, we sell the compost to farms that grow their kale, and then it just starts over and over and over again. So it's pretty cool to see, to help all the soil around everyone in their gardens, because I think especially in Eastern Oregon, the soil kind of sucks here. There's no life in it. Like, it's just kind of been killed off by the weather or like synthetic fertilizers and stuff. So trying to give it some life back to help your plants and decrease your need for synthetic fertilizers has been pretty cool to see how people's either yards or gardens have vastly improved by using our living soil instead of just throwing some synthetic fertilizers at it. So
Yeah, the Oregon has so many different biomes or topographies. I don't know what the word is, but they have like so many different soils and things and abilities. So you kind of saw that and you're like, hey, people still have gardens. Do you have a garden too yourself now?
I have one raised garden bed, but unfortunately our goats kind of got into it. But one of my friends and I, from LeGrand, we decided to do a community garden plot together. She has 2 kids that are 10 and 13. And so it's been a really fun experience to not only get my nieces and nephews excited about gardening, seeing the whole process, but we've used a lot of my compost and worm castings, and we grew like some huge red cabbages that were pretty impressive. I mean, I don't know if it's all about, that it was all because of the compost. Maybe we just got
Yeah.
really lucky, but I'm going to say maybe.
No, just go ahead and say it was for marketing
Yeah, it
purposes.
was totally all because of my compost. But it was really cool to not only have like my niece and nephew like involved in the whole process of, growing something, eating a radish like right out of the ground, eating snap peas, like, freshly picking them. But knowing that setting up the soil probably was a huge benefit to how successful our plants were, and how tall our sunflowers were, and how huge these red cabbages got. So them learning at an early age, and I do a lot of education too, is kind of what helps set up your whole garden for this year and next year, really.
That's so cool. I love that. I've always wanted to have room to do that, and I will someday. I pretty much kill every plant that I
Or
that I
just check out if you have a community garden nearby. Not
Oh,
only has
yeah.
that, I mean, I take all the weeds from the community garden because the goats eat them, and then we compost everything, or anything like, somebody trims a tomato plant or anything. So there a couple times a week we take all of the like vegetation or weeds, and then we get to use it for goat feed, or it goes in the compost, which we get the compost hot enough it kills the weed seeds, which is pretty
Mm,
cool. And then, but yeah, I think community gardens are, a really cool thing to not only feel like you're part of a community, but also, gosh, just like grow a tomato, or see, watch a radish grow. Like, you put in the work and everything, and then you get to, harvest and eat the reward. It's a really cool process to be
yeah.
part of, and to show, like the next generation that they can grow their own radishes or tomatoes, or, a pretty sunflower and stuff like that, is really
Yeah.
probably what I guess fuels what I do the
The
most.
passion. Yeah. It's a very like well it's a tactile, it's so obvious. Obviously,
Mhm.
you nourish your body and you can see what you've made, that you've created with your own hands and with your help too. I feel like your community education is something, and of course that will come out in our other episodes, so check out that episode with Emily Garland. Um, those questions are so important to ask people like you, is how you educate other people, but also for this one-on-one conversation, I would love to find out kind of what has your evolution as a business been like. So, going from someone who had the idea in a small town and saw the need and started off, having your coworkers just benefit from your research and your self-education, and then moving on to becoming the go-to source for that in your community. That, point A to point B is just amazing, but I'm sure it wasn't always like easy and you had to make a lot of hard questions and come up with solutions. So
Yeah.
the first question I have for you is you said you took the boot camp, the co-starters boot camp. Are there specific things in there that you feel like shaped your business approach, or specific lessons that have helped you get to the point that you are now? Anything that stands out that you learned?
I mean, it definitely gave me like a focus of each week. Like, this week you're gonna focus on this, and it actually, there was part of it where it was like you're gonna find two businesses or things like what you're starting, and you have to call and talk to them on the phone. And so I called a composting company from Colorado. I got a hold of them. They reached out with their educational support team, and so I got to have an hour-long conversation with them. And they do curbside composting and stuff like that. But the business that probably inspired me the most is Vermont Composting Company, and they've been in business for, I don't know, about 50 years, and their founder was in his 80s. And I called him, and I probably could have been on the phone for like 3 hours with him. He was so like welcoming, and it was all about, yep, we definitely want, more people in this business, and, learn from these mistakes that I made and stuff like that. I mean, that was pretty nerve-wracking to basically call like one of your like idols, I guess, in your own business. And so like getting to talk to like Carl Hammer on the phone was really, really inspiring to me, that like this can be a very like, profitable business. He had like 25 employees at the time that I called him 3 years ago, and he'd been doing it for 50 years. And just knowing that it is possible kind of makes you feel like, oh, maybe I can, like, somebody else has done this. I'm not really necessarily starting from scratch. This isn't a new idea. It's just a new idea in this area.
Mm,
So, and then also just I think the biggest thing that Lisa Dawson helped me with was creating that there was value to what I was doing, and to value how much time from, picking up someone's bucket to 8 months later, like how much labor intensive that is. Because I get a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, you can have my food scraps. Like, that's fine. Just come get them whenever you want. And I'm like, well, I kind of need help paying for like gas, and there's a ton of labor involved. I think the statistic is it takes 4 compost employees to do the same amount of work as one landfill person does, because it's more of a process. It's more labor intensive. There's a lot more science that we have to, make sure everything is correct in the soil. So trying to tell someone that, I'm not just taking your food scraps just to take them, that it is an actual like service, but the benefit to them is they get the finished product back. Like, when was the last time you got anything from, your garbage service or your recycling service? They just make you pay to take things away, and we're having you pay to be part of the process. We take the hardest parts out of the process for you, but you're still, we're still taking a huge amount of effort to make a really good quality product for the end. We're not just taking things away. There's no really such thing as away. If you get your garbage picked up, it has to go somewhere, and it might biodegrade a little bit, but it still has to go somewhere. It never just disappears completely without some sort of either space or like leaching out of things or whatever. So
Yeah.
the fact that we take something that you would have normally thrown away and we make something that's beneficial for your garden, or that is more beneficial for the planet, composting instead of the landfill. I think those were some big selling points, but mostly Lisa just taught me, like, you're doing this huge thing with somebody's thing, and make sure you put some value on that, because if you undervalue it in the beginning, then it's really hard to be like, oh, you have to increase prices, and you have to increase prices, and you have to increase prices. And so if you can start out where it's not an extreme, amount of price, but it's not devaluing what you're doing, then there's a happy medium. Because at first I was like, oh, I'm only going to charge this much. And she was like, oh no, you should be at least charging this. Like,
Yeah.
you find out you're charging the right amount when people start questioning it. But when people aren't questioning it at all, you've probably way devalued what you're doing. And then, when I had to turn piles by hand by pitchfork and everything, I finally was like, yeah, this is like 8 months of me turning this pile by hand. That's so much effort. And then also like driving to do pickups and, even just the buckets alone and stuff, like everything has a cost. So making sure I kind of factored everything into the cost of our service was extremely helpful. Because I think if I would have done it how I thought without any input, then I probably would be struggling a lot more just to, keep gas in the van.
Yeah, it is a service. I mean, it started off being something that you're passionate about, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be paid to do it, and it should,
Right.
be something that you can live off of and reinvest in your community, which you've certainly done. I
Mm-hmm.
think I've heard so many, feedback anecdotes from people who went to co-starters or specifically were instructed by someone like Lisa Dawson, and it helped them not necessarily see, oh, there's a specific way to make a business or to build it, but
Right.
there's some mistakes that a lot of people make that you could avoid by writing down the value and setting a price and thinking about that analytically, and not just however you feel in the beginning of the stages of building a business. That's a really great piece of advice. I think the exciting thing about having education like that is that you can have the expertise of people around you who have built similar or different businesses,
Yeah.
and they'll tell you, hey, I made these mistakes, please don't do those things.
Right.
Or just sit down to write it down.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in a composting coalition that's nationwide, and it's constantly like we're able to ask each other questions like, well, what kind of bins do you guys use, and how,
Mm.
does anyone have an example contract of setting up something with a school, or does anyone have a sample contract of this, or has anyone seen this bug in their compost? There's so much value. I mean, I might not be the most like talkative person and get talk on every subject that somebody has, but if I had a question, it's very easy for me to like look there first, because
Yeah.
somebody else probably asked it or had the same issue. They might have to deal with different like permittings and laws and like things like that, but it's a huge benefit to have like this huge network of other community composters that they can say, well, this is how much I sell my worm castings for, and this is like I clean my buckets and other people line their buckets. So there's we all kind of do it slightly different, but we're all kind of there and extremely supportive of each other. It's not just like, well, I'm going to do it this way and you're competition. It's very communal in community composting. It was kind of like that with co-starters too, even though like somebody was wanting to be a photographer and somebody else was we were doing very different things, but it was really nice to bounce ideas off of each other. Like, what if I price it like this? And what if I do this? And, should I go to farmer's market? Is that beneficial to me or is that just a waste of time? And so it was really nice to not only have a group of people that maybe were in different, stages of their business or kind of all in the same of like, is this even a good idea? Like not everyone that finished my class that I was in started their business, because I think they got like, well, maybe I need to do more research or something like that. But it was really good just to have a group of people being like, well, have you thought about this? Because I think when you start a business, you're very focused on like, well, this is how I want to do things and this is the only way. And when you get a few opinions, it's kind of like market research where you're like, that sounds good, but what if you did it this way? Or what if, like it kind of was a really nice space to feel supported, but also feel like you could take somebody else's, not necessarily like criticism, but like maybe ideas to even elevate your original idea.
Yeah, it's opening the pool of the influence that you of other people that can give you information. It's a good place to like digest too. I think that the business classes that I admire most are ones that have involvement and like active participation of the people there. So, honestly, the information that I've retained, business education or not, is when I feel like I'm involved. I think that that program does a really good job of doing that, especially with the amazing facilitators. The other question I had was about the challenges that you faced as a sustainability focused business in rural Oregon. And I know that the typical challenges of being in a rural environment might apply to you or might not apply to you because of the type of service that you provide. Have you had any thought about things that were hard for you to overcome and how you're starting to overcome them, or how you did over the last couple years of building your business?
I mean, there's a lot of people that do their own composting. So, a lot of times people come to me at farmers market. I'm like, oh, what do you do with your food scraps? And they're like, well, I have chickens, I have compost, like, but I've also had some customers where they're like, I can't make it as good as you make it. So I might compost still myself to decrease food waste and stuff, but then they give me the majority of their stuff, because them getting 6 buckets back a year of our finished compost that's really high in microbes is more beneficial to them than them doing all the hard work and space and everything like that at home. So I mean, rural, you have people that live out of town that they're like, well, I just give it to my chickens and that's fine, and that's totally fine. It's more like, as long as you're for composting, like that's great.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like anyone's competition or anything like that. I think is if you're reducing food waste and things
Yeah.
like that, then that's great. Like I might be really good at composting. I'm not the best person at other sustainable things, and I'll 100% admit that. Like I might not recycle correctly or, things like that. But I do one thing pretty well. So I think in sustainability or small areas, like there's going to be some people who are very for it, and they just know that you're an option and that they could use you as an option and use your services. And then there's gonna be some people that you can just tell that they're like, I don't really get the value. I don't really know why that's important. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's more like, I just need you to know that I'm here and that I can do this service. And it's not necessarily my idea to change your mind. And I definitely don't want to be a person in sustainability that like shames you for not doing the right thing, because I'm not perfect at sustainability. And, like, I feel like it's more just bringing awareness. And then if you don't want to do the hard work of the very high labor intensive stuff of composting, let me do it for you. We're just trying to
Yeah.
take that off your hands. It's like some people have a house cleaner. I think that's awesome. I think whatever lets you focus on the bigger things in your life is great. So it's more like I'm a service that, hey, composting is great for the environment and the community. And you don't even have to do it yourself. You can let us do it for you. We'll pick it up. You don't even have to wash your bucket. We will take care of everything. Just put it out on the curb on the day that you need to and enjoy the finished compost that we have at the end.
Mm.
So I think like my first 10 customers were my hardest ones to get. There was a few of them that were like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I'm so glad that this is available. And then you see pink buckets around every Monday in LeGrand, and then you wonder, what's that all about? What's that all about? And then now we have a van that's wrapped and looks really cool. Rob Speed Delivery, Cat Dooley, they did it.
Mm.
So I think the more pink buckets that are out there, the more people want to know what it is and why other people are doing it. So we get a lot of referrals from people who are walking their dogs and they see like 10 pink buckets and they want to figure out what that's about. Or sometimes people stop our drivers and we give them a business card and we're like, it's all on the website, it's pretty easy, sign up whenever you want. So getting those first 10 customers was the hardest part, and then after that it was kind of like it slowly kind of ripple affected, and it's gotten more and more popular, and we've gotten more and more customers in the last like year than I did the first year and a half.
Yeah. It seems like it's kind of word of mouth, and that makes a lot of sense for a rural community. And I
Yeah.
honestly love the energy of that more than, what you think marketing might be if you haven't started a business or if you're thinking about it. Or if you've got a young business in a rural area, you might think marketing is spending money on ads or redoing your website, many times, or something that's more digital or not face to face. But you've done a lot of work connecting with people and educating people in your community, which I think, and it seems to me like that's a really key part of how you built and got to be a strong, sustainable sustainability company. I think that it's interesting because you have a passion, a focus for something that people feel, and I know I feel like inherently drawn to, but I don't feel drawn to spend hours and hours researching it or have the land necessarily to do it. So, can you tell us a little bit? I know we are going to touch on it in the other episode as well with Emily, but can you tell us about the actions that you take in your community to educate, to kind of get the word out in a face to face way?
Me being at farmers market in LeGrand on Saturdays was a huge benefit, because I think people were like, yeah, I've seen your pink buckets, I kind of know what you do, but then they could actually like approach me and say, well, how do I sign up? How does this work? What kind of product, what kind of things can I put in my pink bucket? Well, what if I'm gone for a month to Australia? Kind of taking, because maybe they don't want to call me and ask me that stuff. Maybe they don't want to email me that things. So being like that face to face at farmers market, and usually people at farmers market are very into like sustainability and regenerative stuff to begin with. So it was a great place for me to show up as, and just be able to be approachable and people ask questions. This last year, I brought a baby goat with me a few times to some festivals or farmers market, and that gets, like, why do you have a goat here?
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
does this have to do with composting? I'm like, well, goat manure is one of the best things that you can have in your garden other than
Mm.
composting. And so if that is one of the basic things that we put in our compost, it tends to be really beneficial for your garden.
Yeah.
So that's why we have goats. But having a baby goat is a very good conversation piece, especially our bottle baby, who's very friendly with everybody. So that's part of, I guess, like being more approachable. We take food scraps from the school right next to us in North Powder, and we have for about a year and a half. So when we first got set up, not only did I want to talk to like the staff, because I didn't want them to be like confused and be like, well, I don't know what you can take, I don't know what you can't take. Like,
Mm.
I wanted them to be very comfortable and familiar and make it super easy for the staff at the cafeteria next door. And then I also said, why don't you let me have a free education day? I'll come in one day. I'll talk to all the grades or classes that want to be talked to. So I talked to all the elementary school kids. So not only did we talk about like what you can compost, what not to compost in the cafeteria, but also why it was important, like whether for soil health or the planet, or decreasing waste. So they kind of learned the benefit of why we're even doing this, because a lot of times it's like, oh, we're doing this, but I don't get the point. So if you kind of give them the why, then it's much easier for them to continue doing the task that you want them to do. But also, I mean, I gave them stickers. We gave them like coloring pages of like a compost bucket with food in it and stuff like that, and they really enjoyed that. But also, I went into the actual lunch hour and stood there between a compost bin and a garbage can and was kind of like, okay, this is all food stuff. We can put all of that in there or pick out these pieces of trash and then put everything in the compost. So, I mean, obviously, the first couple of times they're going to not remember. And then we also had posters made this last year that, has a compost bucket and a trash can, and it looks just like their trash can at school and just like the bin that they have. And so you have to we made it very visual. So like, a kindergartner could say, oh, I can put my half a hamburger in there, or, my leftover chips, but I can't put the wrapper of the chips in there, and I can't put like this plastic Ziploc bag that my apple slices were in. So we tried to make it very visually pleasing, so that kids of any age could kind of decipher, like, I can put this in here and I put this other stuff in here. And then if there was any liquids, they could put it in the bucket. So I think educating is one of the hugest things that I do, whether it's going to local libraries in the summer and like reading a cute book about composting, or any of those types of things, because I think then that kid goes home and is excited about, like, did you know that my half an apple could be used to make really cool dirt, and then we could grow another apple, just things like that. Like getting like kids excited about something is kind of how sometimes you can bring the parents in. And then a lot of times we'll have like a big worm bin at like a library or festival or outdoor school. I did a lot of 5th and 6th grade outdoor school this year too, where they can kind of dig in there and they can say, oh, this was a blueberry, or this is this. And there's a worm and the different life cycles of a red wiggler worm. So they can kind of like, they could pick out like little worm eggs. So they could kind of see the huge benefit of like the whole life cycle of the worms breaking down stuff. And then they got to sift finished compost. So they're like, oh, now this is all like small and uniform and looks really cool. And like, I didn't know worm castings were so soft and light. And I didn't know why we even sifted, compost to begin with. But explaining to them, like, sometimes you go to restaurants just because you like the shape of their ice, is similar to why we sift compost and why we want we want everything to be pretty uniform for your plants to be able to like not be stuck underneath something. So,
Yeah.
but I feel like education is probably the most fun part of my job at this point. Because now I have like great employees that can kind of, run the yard, drive the routes and things like that. So it frees me up to go out and educate, or to go to festivals and be able to take food scraps from bigger events. And but education, I think seeing that little spark that like kids get it and get why like composting is important, or that maybe their soil needs a little bit of help, has been really great. And then testimonials from other customers too, kind of is like that referral again too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like you said, I think you mentioned before, having someone have a bad experience with their composting soil would be catastrophic. And I know that nobody wants their customers to have a bad experience, but
Right.
in your case, especially in a small town and in a town where they value those things, they only have a certain amount of excess income to spend on things that bring them joy and make the planet more sustainable. And that's something that it's your job to educate them, but it's also something that you had to see in your own business. Is I recognize the value of this. Honestly, educating people is something that I think is underutilized a lot in a lot of businesses. Having I always say, my background's in marketing and PR, and I say, give people free information and show them that you value their time. And that's what you're doing with those kids. And it comes back to you through not just the kids that are educated, but their families and the community that sees that you care about them. It's a lot of like giving a lot, but also you're seeing the return. Those kind of experiences that I've had where it was in person, I know that I spent a lot of time growing up in small towns, and I remember when businesses did things like that because maybe I knew and maybe I did care, but you just didn't have my attention. And having things like that it makes it fun. I know a baby goat would draw my attention for a really long time, and they have because they're adorable. And the pink buckets are great too. That's another great example of like you said, it's like Barbie Dream House Magic School Bus, I think you said was the combo. I was like, that is perfect. That's what I want to see in any company's. Like, it looks different. It looks like something that makes me feel excited or intrigued. So I think you've done a wonderful job of all those things. I think everybody listening should 100% go check out your website. It's thecompostchick.com. And then your Instagram is at @thecompostchick. You can see the mascot, your lab. Is he a labradoodle or lab?
Yeah, no, he's just a lab. So Compost Carl. And then, our like bottle baby goat she goes down to the property with me about every time I go. So she's very active. Yes, I compost and everything like that, but then other people are like, yeah, she's the compost chick, but she also has goats, or she has these two crazy labs, and
Yeah.
or she's always making her husband build random things. There's always random, I guess, things that are compost related, but also like, I guess, what is different about our compost
humanizing. Yeah, it's very much like I could know this person. Like they seem like me. Yeah.
I have had people come up to me at farmers market and like give me a big hug, and they're like, I'm so and so.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll give you a hug.
That's kind of small towns too, isn't it? They're like, I know of you, so you are in my mind. Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. It's like
for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Rural Blueprint. If today's conversation resonated with you, visit us at reinventingrural.com to access resources for rural entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and business development programs. I'm Brad with Reinventing Rural, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Rural Blueprint.